Why wouldn't I? Do you really think that? You're not mad, are you? These sound like questions, but if you ever answer them directly, you've probably noticed the awkward silence that follows. That's because some questions aren't meant to be answered. They're setups. And if you take them literally, you're left confused, embarrassed, or even hurt. On this episode, we're going to talk about why people do this and what they really want. Are you ready? Let's go. What's going on? My name is Coach Lee Hopkins. My pronouns are he, him, his, and you're listening to the Patterns of Possibility podcast, the podcast for late identified autistic adults who want real relationships without fake masks. Let's talk connection, clarity, and showing up as your authentic self. So, did you like my questions? Do you want some more of those questions? Well, here's the thing. Not every question in conversation is a real request for data. Some questions carry emotional meaning instead. Groan. Why can't you just say the words? I get it. But what I found is that people really struggle with opening up just as much as you might struggle with opening up as an autistic person. Let me explain. When someone asks, why wouldn't I? They don't actually want you to listen, but they don't actually want you to list those reasons. What they're really saying is, of course I care. Of course I'm glad to help. Of course I'm going to do the thing that you are impressed by what I've done. And this can be tricky when you take things at face value, especially if you're autistic, because you're really tuned in to give honest answers to what sounds like a real question. So this is pulled from my real life experiences. Just a couple of weeks ago, something like this happened to me. Even though I have this full awareness of the fact that some people aren't asking for actual data. They're just putting something out there in the air. They're putting emotion out there in the air, and they're leaving us to decipher what they're trying to say. So I had mentioned to someone that I needed help, and I said that I was surprised and delighted by the fact that they were going to help me. And the response was, why wouldn't I? What? I froze for a bit, and then I started to answer the question, why wouldn't I? And here's reasons why you wouldn't help me. And they were like, no. Of course, no, why wouldn't I? And so they asked the question again. And I was like, oh, you don't really want the why wouldn't I answered. You really just wanted to tell me that you were happy to do it and that you're glad to help. And I thought, there's one of those questions that is full of emotional energy. And it happens to be good energy, happens to be joyful energy, it happens to be something that I'm happy to handle. But why couldn't you just say that? See that? I just set it up. That was a question itself. Why couldn't you just say that? I don't care why you couldn't say that. I'm not interested in that. That question carries emotional weight in the sense that I don't like that you didn't just say what you meant. Instead, you said a question. And maybe to an holistic person, that sounds like something that makes sense to them. But for me, I took the words fully at face value, and I realized that I have to translate sometimes. We have to translate sometimes because they're not going to say, of course I care. A little sidebar here about emotions and vulnerability. I think anytime you express how you feel, whether it's happy, sad, joy, um, happy and joy are one, anger, frustration, sadness, and then there's fear, these four emotions. Anytime you express that, it's vulnerability because it gives an opportunity for the emotion to be attacked or dismissed or thrown away. You know, like if someone said, "Of course I care," and it was disregarded, then they would feel hurt. So I think that's why people don't do it. So why couldn't you say that? I got my answer to that just by my own observations, and I've noticed that about myself. Like, I don't want to reveal something. I don't want to reveal really how I feel. I have to cover it up in something else so that others won't hurt it if they dismiss it, or they don't get an opportunity to dismiss it. Because back to the question asking, I asked a question. They asked a question. They asked a question. Why wouldn't I? Nobody has an answer to that. And the answer that I give can be completely dismissed. So it gives them a bit of safety around saying, why wouldn't I? Or, do you really think that? Or, you're not mad, are you? It gives them some safety around asking those questions, as the sense that, well, it can't really be rejected. But your answer to their questions can be rejected. And if this is making sense to you, then listen to more of my podcasts. This is how I think, and I understand how interacting with people. So, back to the person who asked that question. I was caught off guard, and then I realized that, oops, I don't need to answer that question. I just need to say thank you. I have to figure out the emotion that's tied to what they're saying to me, tied to the question, and then say thank you. If I figure the emotion is something that I want to receive, that feels good, thank you. In this case, it's a gift of their time and energy. Thank you. But I think it's a lot of emotional work to go through that. And just between you, me, and the internet, I am a bit weary of when people ask those kinds of questions pretty frequently. I actually don't really enjoy them much at all, but I understand they come out. But I have a belief that there's a lack of vulnerability that comes with asking those kinds of questions, because then this one was pretty harmless in the sense that it was wrapped in some joy. It was a happy emotion that they were sharing with me. Why wouldn't I? Meaning, I'm very happy to help. Great. I'm going to accept that. Thank you. But when we move to these other emotions like anger, like sadness, and like fear, we move to those kinds of emotions, when they wrap them up in questions, and maybe I don't want to receive their anger. Did you really think that? I don't know what's in there. I don't know. Are you mad that I think that? Are you scared that I think that? What's in there? And so I don't know what to do with that. I wouldn't know what to do with that at face value. That's what I mean. Like at face value, if you ask me, do I really think that? It's obviously, it's a setup question. And I'll give you an example of how you can identify that as a setup question, because I believe that they have two criteria for these setup questions. They're a question that you have already answered. You've already answered. If they ask you, for example, if they ask you your views on Dragon Ball Z being the greatest anime of all time, and they ask you, do you really think that? But you just gave a dissertation. You just gave a whole TED Talk speech about it, about how you love it, about the character development, everything. And they ask you, do you really think that? Why else would you passionately info dump all of that on them? your real thoughts, just for them to ask you, do you really think that? What's in there? What do you mean by, do you really think that? It's obvious that I do really think this. You're having feelings about me really thinking this and expressing this. So that's one criteria. You've already answered the question. And then the second one is that it's an answer that they really don't care for, because you already answered the question. You already answered that with your statement beforehand. Do you really think that? And you say yes. And then the next thing they might say is, really? That's twice you answered the question. They don't care about the answer. They don't care about the answer. They're not interested in that. Do you really think that is laced with something else? Anger, sadness, fear? I don't know. Maybe it is laced with joy. Maybe there is some joy in that. I wouldn't think so, though. And real quick sidebar, I wouldn't think it was joyful, because they would add to it rather than ask you, do you really think that? They'd probably say something like, me too. That's so awesome. That's very exciting. They'd probably make a statement rather than a question. Or they'd probably ask a curious question about the Dragon Ball Z, like, wow, tell me more about why you think Frieza is the best villain. They probably ask a question along those lines. But anger, sadness, and fear come with these setup questions. Some emotionally laced something, and you have to dig through that, because they are too chicken. They are not clear with their words. They cannot say exactly how they feel about the experience. So you've got to go in and you've got to root it out. Whew. That's exhausting. It's exhausting. Isn't it? It's exhausting. Yes, I really think that. I said all that. I told you that, how I felt. Yes, I do really think that. What do you really think? This is proposed to the person asking the question. What do you really think? Oh, you don't like it? Okay, great. Tell me that instead. I don't like your analysis. I really think One Piece is the best anime of all time. Okay, great. Got it. I'm mad because you think otherwise. I think you're crazy. I think you're wild. Great. Thank you so much for clearing up what you actually think and feel. But here's the thing. It's vulnerable. It's scary. It scares people to do that, because boom, now you're in some kind of argument. Now you're in some kind of disagreement. They're afraid that you won't like what they say. But look at you being vulnerable by info dumping in the first place, by sharing truly, passionately, deeply what you experienced, and for only for them to dismiss it. They're afraid the same thing's going to happen to them, so they ask a setup question. How do you answer these setup questions? What do you do with them? I found that the best way to answer setup questions is to simply answer the question without the emotional garbage, without the emotion that might be tied to the question. So there's the data of the question coming at you, and then there's the emotion of the question coming at you. I choose to do the work to separate those and answer the question directly. Do you really think that? Yes. As simply and easily, concisely as possible. Do not give any more explanation. You've already given enough. You've already satisfied that they don't like that answer, so don't give them more of what they don't like. This right here will help you save yourself. It has helped me save myself from so many arguments and misunderstandings from other people. Because then I'm able to isolate the fact that it's a them problem, not a me problem. It's a they don't like what I shared. not a I said something wrong. And this is a very powerful way to reflect it right back to them. Answer the question concisely. Simple. Don't respond to the emotional energy that's coming at you with that question. Do you really think that? Yes. Really? Yes. And then, if you want to be super great with this, if you want to open them up, if you want to find out what they're not saying, then you make a comment about it. You make a comment about their response to your question. It goes something like this. Do you really think that? Yes. Really? Yes. It seems like you disagree or you think something else. Is that right? You might get people who are going to be eager to answer your question, but then you might also get people who might get angry that you've asked that question. The key here, really, in maneuvering these kinds of conversations is to have your own emotional intelligence and emotional awareness. Being calm and recognizing that you're no longer playing this emotional game anymore. Not emotions. If you want to try and push them to say what they really mean and use their words, then you answer calmly and easily. You ask one question and let them respond. That's it. We're trying to get them to say what they mean. And you can see people be frustrated with this because they don't want to have that level of vulnerability. They're afraid of it. And they're going to get angry at you for prompting them to be vulnerable and say something that they're not sure how to say, or that they're afraid they're going to get hurt if they say it. Right? So that's how I deal with setup questions. Remembering that there are emotions that come along with those questions and that there's data that comes along with those questions, and focusing on strictly the data, strictly the information, answering the questions clearly and concisely, you are going to reveal more about that person than you thought. You're going to get them to reveal themselves. And I talk about this a lot when I coach. We go through extensive coaching on this because I know these words, they reach your ears, but it's only the awareness piece, helping you be more aware of it. The practice really, really makes a difference. Practicing, experiencing that, finding the right words to say, actually not trying to get hooked up with, or not getting hooked with the question and answering the question, and having an emotional response to the fact that you've already answered their question and they've asked you 3 more times. That's annoying, right? That's annoying and that's frustrating. And you feel like you're not being heard and they feel like they're not being heard because you're answering the question with data and they're answering the question emotionally initially. And you're just like, both of you, it's frustrating. I like to make sure that I can get people to be clear as possible with me. And I really try hard to make sure that I'm clear as possible with other people. And so one way that you can do it is recognizing that their questions, sometimes they're not really questions. Why wouldn't I? Do you really think that? You're not mad, are you? They sound like questions. And if you ever answered them and they led to an argument or an awkward conversation, they were probably a setup question. The big takeaway is that communication is a skill. And if you recognize that people communicate in layers, then you can connect with people on a different level. You can connect with people that you weren't able to talk to before because they won't say things in plain English. You can recognize who to avoid because they're not saying things plainly and clearly to you. And if you only have just enough energy, only have just enough spoons to get through a conversation with your manager because you have this skill, then boom, it has served you well. It has served you well. If this episode resonated with you, if this made sense to you, if you'd like to learn more about how to use this skill to your benefit and stop being drained by these weird ass questions about nothing that require no answer, if you'd like to get better at spotting those questions so that you're not frustrated and you know exactly how to handle these kinds of conversations with ease, join the Patterns of Possibility community. You can find the link in the show notes. It's there for you. I have tons of resources, including videos, PDFs, and access to me. You get 100% access to me. Ask me your questions, and I will personally answer them. And you also have community support. Those are others who understand exactly what you're going through, exactly what your experiences are, and they can help you by making sure that you don't feel alone. Check it out. The link in my profile, link in the show notes, the Patterns of Possibility community is open for you. If this episode resonated with you, the best way to support the podcast is to rate and review it. Your words will help other late diagnosed autistic adults find this space to know that they're not alone. Just a few seconds from you can open up the door for someone else to feel seen. Hey, I appreciate you, and thanks for being here.